let's have a talk about the coronation. Just 4 days away, big events all coming up in the coming weekend. And a major new poll has revealed, well, no appetite for republicanism really in this country. Reform, though, is needed. That is what a new poll has suggested. Well over half the United Kingdom would vote for a constitutional monarchy, with less than a quarter against, according to a new poll by the former Conservative Deputy Chairman Lord Ashcroft. And also 2/3 of the 11,500 people surveyed agree the royal family, quote, might seem a strange system in this day and age, but it works. And roughly the same margin back the current system as more stable and an asset for the UK. However, some 73% said that the royal family needs to modernise to have any chance of surviving. Well, let's talk about all of this with Rupert Bell, our royal correspondent. Good morning.
Good morning, Julia.
I don't think we're surprised by those poll results, are we?
Not at all, really, because I think the interesting one is there's a poll for amongst that for the young, and it definitely is from the 18 to 24 saying, I think it's a very small, in comparison, small percentage saying yes, most saying no. So I think
support for the monarchy is definitely among older age groups.
Yeah, and but it's still, so it shows that they've got to make sure that they appear relevant to that generation to make sure that they can change that.
Now, there's the thing, do people just become more likely to be monarchists when they're older anyway? You just become more, I suppose, just more conservative with a small c largely when you get older.
I think that there's an element of that, but it still, I think, is an important aspect that they've got to seem relevant. And the one thing about the King, you know, the Prince's Trust and everything, he's always been very mindful of trying to make sure the young have a future. And that was one of the things that's come out in some of the programmes that are coming out. He looks to the future and he wants to leave something for his children and grandchildren. So that's very much part of his DNA.
Keeping the firm going. Well, let's talk about what's going to be happening in the coming weekend. Obviously, all these preparations, we've got a drip every day for the last couple of weeks now of new details about the coronation, who's going to be there, who's not going to be there, and the like. There was a big row over the weekend about swearing allegiance, and this bit where the Archbishop of Canterbury is going to call the nation, which got turned into this huge row that we were all going to be told we had to swear allegiance to the King, and it wasn't anything of the sort, was it?
No, it actually says in the thing, invited if you wished. So I think that's about as fairly bland way of doing it, but actually I think I can see the point of why they would like to people, if they go and watch it on a big screen, it is actually a way for people there to feel that they are part of the service. Now, if you don't want to do it, as it says, if you wish, if you don't, no big deal.
I have to say, I do think the things that people can get their knickers in a twist about. We're hearing more and more about what celebrations are going to be. There's going to be, we're told, a £120 million boost to pubs, a £1 billion boost to the economy, people, having street parties. That said, people go, oh, it's great. 3,000 plus already been registered. Frankly, I mean, would you, if you were going to have a street party, frankly, wouldn't you just go ahead and put some bunting out and get some cakes and some booze and you wouldn't really necessarily call the council? I'm not sure I would. But the weather forecast is not looking good. Either of the last 2 weekends would have been just fine.
Well, unfortunately, historically, coronations means bad weather.
Really?
Yeah, 1953 was in June. You think that might be all right. For 2nd of June, it was 11 degrees and pretty cold. It was raining in 1937, so we don't do good weather coronations.
That's just one of our
So we
things.
might as well have it in November.
Okay.
At
least then you know.
Yeah,
you're not getting hopeful. But we're hearing more about this this Windsor Castle concert. Front page of a couple of papers today. Anton Deck are going to be hosting. I mean, best in the business, simple as that, hosting that event, because it was quite embarrassing earlier on, wasn't it? That sort of the Adeles and the Ed Sheerans are all saying, oh, sorry, we seem to find we're washing our hair that night. They're away on big world tours. But he has got some good names now.
Lionel Richie. And actually, I didn't realise that his role within the Prince's Trust. Yeah. And that's why he's going to be at the coronation. So,
as someone who has danced on stage with Lionel Richie.
Oh,
did I mention that?
Everyone I've spoken to about Lionel Richie, he's definitely gets under people's skin and in a very positive way.
Very positive.
And I don't quite feel the fever. I think I'm not.
He played at a bash I went to, and he was amazing. And he had everyone on the dance floor within like the second bar of the first song. And then he invited the birthday girl and other people up on stage, and I was up on stage. My husband, who's in IT, if you're listening, never forget this. He was standing there videoing. I'm on stage dancing with Lionel Richie on stage, and he's got the camera up and he's videoing it. Got into the cab on the way home. I said, oh my God, show me the video of me with Lionel Richie. Yeah, he hadn't actually pressed record.
Oh.
And yet,
the marriage has survived.
The marriage has somehow survived. No one's quite sure how. There's a still of when he turned it off at the end, but actually was turning it on. But yeah. Any marriage that survives that is
this could just actually be pure fantasy, actually, on your behalf.
It never happened.
Never happened. But
someone else has a video. Someone else. But anyway, he's got some big names. I mean, Lionel Richie headlined Glastonbury a while back, so he's a big name. So that's on Sunday. That's going to be a big concert. There is always this worry that everything will be a sort of a washout with the rain, but that's what we do in Britain, isn't it? We kind of power through this stuff. Well,
concert Glastonbury, or it's always in rain. That's your rite of passage, isn't it? If you go to Reading Festival, the whole point of teenagers, it must be as wet as possible.
I thought it was setting fire to tents.
Well, just leaving tents at home or whatever.
Yes.
But I think, look, the weather will be disappointing, and that might affect the people who think, well, I'm going to go into London on Saturday to see the coronation, might as well just stay at home and get a better view and not feel as uncomfortable if it is. But it's going to be warm, but on the wet side.
But he's going to be concerned, isn't he, that this is a big sort of spectacular. I know he wants to tone it down, so a 2-hour ceremony, not a 4-hour ceremony. I think that just happens because we've got a shorter attention span now. But actually, there will be worries in the Buckingham Palace that the crowds won't be the same sort of crowds. But of course they're not going to be as they were in 1953, for goodness sake.
Well, yeah.
There was nothing else to do in 1953.
Well, and
they didn't have Netflix.
One of the problems was, that was the whole problem in 1953. The country was coming out, and it was a cause for celebration. That was what Winston Churchill wanted. We were coming out post-Second World War, and it was the new Britain that was going to be. Clearly, we're in different times. We don't have the service personnel to put on the show that we did before because there's only 6,000 out of 45,000. Yeah, well, that's a debate, and indeed, it's causing issues amongst the street lining. Everything's being done slightly different. Yeah. So security.
But that's a really big security. That 120 million plus being spent on security. Big concerns about eco-protesters who've been threatening, using the rape alarms we've discussed before, who can scare the horses. But also these Republican, not my king protesters. Now, I don't want anyone booing. I think you shouldn't ever, whatever your views are, you shouldn't be ruining other people's fun. I don't like that. You should let other people have that event. You can make your views known. It's legal in a peaceful protest in our country, but I think it's one thing people holding up a sign. It's another thing if people are actually trying to disrupt what other people are trying to do. I think that's completely wrong.
But the king is. Remember when his investiture as Prince of Wales? Wales was going through lots of anti-British English sentiment at the time, and he says, "Well, that's part of life." So the king.
But also,
gets
he learned Welsh, so he could say his oath in Welsh as well.
Well, no, he played a very good hand, and that's. I think he's aware, and he knows there will be people who don't believe in the system, and he's not stupid. So I think that's the point. If people want to, as long as it doesn't disrupt. Look, I was at the Grand National. Yes,
I would imagine you be one of the people pulling people off the hedges, making it all happen.
No, I'm not. Other people can do that.
He was in his top hat and tails.
Yeah, well, no, and I think that, and the organisers there were quite happy to have protests. They know that, and they wouldn't mind at the Derby or wherever. But when it starts to then cause a disruption, that's where it oversteps the line.
And again, I think they lose public support. Benedict Spence, still listening to this. Do you think there will be concern in the palace about protests and concern also about the number of people, the crowds? And again, things will be dampened if it's bad weather, which would be a shame because, again, this is our sort of calling card to the world, isn't it? Our pomp and ceremony, which we just do magnificently.
I mean, well, that's the thing, isn't it? I mean, there might be concern about this sort of thing, but there will be preparations in place. But, the fact that it is slimmed down, the fact that we don't have the service personnel, as Rupert said, that we once would have done, that we can't put on quite the same show. I know Prince Charles is, King Charles, is talking about, wanting to modernise it, but it is, if you like, an advert for the UK. And the fact that
you can't modernise it too much.
Well, the fact that we can't put on the same kind of coronation, whether he wants to or not, that's kind of the point, is that we can't do what we used to do. And we were talking about sort of managed decline earlier. Well, what better advert for the fact that we're talking about potentially people, eco-protesters protesting the most sort of environmentally conscious man who could possibly, want to be head of state, and they're still going to do it anyway. And you think, well, that's the kind of the situation we're in right now, isn't it? It's very silly, but it's probably going to happen, and everybody's going to see it happening.
Absolutely. Again, I think they're just going to ruin their own cause by doing so. I really do. Rupert Bell, I know we're going to be talking to you throughout the day.